if your goal is to be a touring musician, you have to be thinking about making music for yourself that you love, but also, considering your audience. If you're just making music for yourself and you don't care what the result is, then by all means proceed. If you're watching this podcast saying, how do I get an agent? Well, agents are, our job is to guide your career and to help monetize your career at the end of the day by engaging in different forms of media and live performance. That's it. So we have to always consider that audience. We have to always be mindful of ultimately who you're targeting as your fans.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Headliner Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is one of the biggest agents in the dance music industry. He got his start as a promoter, throwing shows at just 17 years old, and has since gone on to represent a huge roster of artists, including Marshmello, Alesso, Slander, NGHTMRE, and many more. From United Talent Agency, this is Ben Hogan.
Hey, how's it going, Nick? How you doing?
What's up, brother? Great to have you on here, man. I'm very, very excited because you are the first agent. You were the first music talent agent that we've had on the show. So super pumped to have you and to share some of your wisdom with the audience.
Very happy to be here. Thanks for letting me be the first agent on this show. It's an honor.
I think I just saw that you are in Nashville now. You're not in LA anymore.
Yeah, I was in LA for 12 years and I recently relocated to Nashville. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland originally. My family's in Baltimore, my brother, sister, mom, dad. So this is a lot closer.
Yeah.
And my dad's getting a bit older. It's just good to be closer to them. And it's a fresh new city. And, there's a lot going on in Nashville. It's one of the fastest growing cities in the country. So many people coming here and it's Music City. So
yeah,
it just it made sense for me. It's a world, a new world. And, I saw, honestly, in 12 years, I think, as much of LA as I needed to see, at least for right now. I was a California guy. I've lived in all the different neighborhoods there. I've seen it all. So, I think it's good to keep things fresh and, experience new cities and new areas.
It was cool to see that. I don't know if you know, for me, I moved out to Austin about 2 years ago. I did my stint in LA. I was there for 13 years, about the same time.
Yeah.
And living out in Austin has been rad. Also another fast-growing city, another very music-heavy city. And it's just been this eye-opening experience where it's like, wait, you don't have to live in LA, right?
Yeah.
You can still live in other places and get shit done. I'm curious about your thought on this because I have a lot of artists ask me this, especially DJs, because the LA scene is really so big and there is so much of the industry is out there. Do you think that a young artist that's coming up and trying to establish themselves, do you think that they need to be in LA?
Well, if it's a short answer, no, you do not need to be in LA. But it does depend on your personality and your strengths, right? If I'm somebody who's a young artist and I'm a very social person and I'm a night owl and I like to be out and I like to meet new people and I like to be in the club and I can afford it and I can move with a couple roommates. I moved to LA when I was 22 years old, 21 years old. And at the time it was the best thing for me. I met hundreds of people in the music industry. I met hundreds of artists. The first time I met Jauz was probably 5 months living into LA at Avalon, right? On the side little area where everybody smokes cigarettes, so and we work together now.
That was your personality. You were having fun and you enjoyed that lifestyle and that scene.
Yeah, for me, it was obviously huge for my career. I moved from Baltimore, Maryland to LA. So again, a city not necessarily connected to the music industry. Nobody else really in the music industry living in Baltimore, then moving to kind of the center of music business is really in LA and New York. LA specifically, it was huge for me. Now, that having been said, if you're an introverted, kind of sit in the studio and crank out tunes and you're somebody who doesn't like going out late and you don't really like sitting in the club when you're not performing as an artist, you might hate LA. Some people might despise that kind of lifestyle. But California is a great state and LA is a great city. It's just should never be a necessary thing.
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
artists should look at it that way. I have artists who do not live in LA who are at the top of the music industry. I have artists who are just starting off who live in the middle of nowhere, relative to LA, small cities. It's not going to make or break you as an artist. But it can help if you're looking to connect with the general wider scene.
Well, let's talk about what is going to make or break you as an artist, because I would really love to know, and I think this is the question that's on everybody's mind, is, what does it take to get an agent?
Yeah.
I think everybody, that's an important step in people's career, having somebody that can go out there and get you shows and book you shows. It's something that everybody wants, but what does it actually take? What are you guys looking for when you sign an act and say yes to bringing somebody on?
So what are we looking for? I mean, this may seem obvious, but we're looking for, a combination of things. First of all, we're looking for an artist who is a likable person, a likable brand, and a good person. Like, you're looking for a good human being that you feel comfortable working with. You believe in their character, you believe in their talent, you believe in their work ethos. So I'm always looking for a human being to connect with and to represent proudly. That's a big part of it. I think even more so obvious is the music. I'm a live booking agent. I'm looking to book stuff that is going to translate to the live audience, that's going to ultimately attract ticket buyers and hardcore fans and be able to cut an actual piece of this pie out. So we're looking for music that's going to not only sell, but I would say specifically in the agent world, music that's going to translate to live rooms, that's going to translate to festivals, that's going to translate to clubs.
When you say translate, what do you mean by that?
So translate meaning, we're looking for music that promoters want to book, right? Music that is profitable. Down tempo, for example. Like if you're making really cool, esoteric, atmospheric down tempo, might be some of the best music in the world. I listen to a lot of it. Is it going to work in a nightclub? Almost certainly not. Is it going to work in Vegas? Almost certainly not. Is it going to work? Like, there has to be a transmutability for the music. It has to be able to create energy that is going to be conducive to like the live touring atmosphere.
Well, that's an interesting point that you make, because I even see artists who are like, they're killing it on Spotify and they're making really good Spotify music. They're getting like 10s and 20 million streams.
Correct.
And then I see them, come to Austin and fucking 4 people show up. It's not translating. It's not selling tickets.
You can have a song that also is very pervasive on social media, but doesn't necessarily translate to the live audience. And that's a twofold thing. One, it's the actual musicality of the record, and if it belongs in on a dance floor or in the DJ culture or the modicum of dance, right? That's part of it. The other part of it is, how is the audience? There is a kind of firm audience, I would say, in all of like dance music. There's people who are regular attendees, there are hardcore lifestyle attendees, there are casual attendees, but there still is like a finite circle, and everybody who interacts with dance music is inside of that circle. So is your music touching those people? Are they finding it? Are they listening to it? Plenty of records that go viral on TikTok do not move the needle or really help or hurt an artist in the actual live touring atmosphere. They can be completely separate, because who listens to music? That's a whole separate circle. People who listen to music and interact with music on Spotify and TikTok and DSPs, they're all in, that's a universe, but the live touring universe is very different. We see that a lot. Like, I'll give you an example in the gaming world, right? There are records that are massive in the gaming kind of streaming world, in the Twitch world, and there's music that's big there, but those people, that demo tends to not go out as much.
They're not leaving their house.
They're not leaving. They're playing games. So that's another whole like kind of sphere that has its own kind of group of souls in that sphere on this planet that don't necessarily go out. So you have to really be thinking, if your goal is to be a touring musician, you have to be thinking about making music for yourself that you love, but also, considering your audience. I would never tell an artist to make music for other people or to make music to be successful. Certainly artists have done that with great success, right? Artists crank out radio records all the time. This will stream well, therefore I'm going to make it. Those are established artists, though, 99% of the time, right?
Yeah.
So I would say to artists, you just have to consider your audience based on your goals. If you're just making music for yourself and you don't care what the result is, then by all means proceed. If you're watching this podcast saying, how do I get an agent? Well, agents are, our job is to guide your career and to help monetize your career at the end of the day by engaging in, different forms of media and live performance. That's it. So we have to always consider that audience. We have to always be mindful of who is going to be, ultimately who you're targeting as your fans, your fan base.
So you guys are looking for, and maybe it's different as well, I'll say you are looking for likability. Is this the right person, right?
Yeah.
And is the music really going to translate to the dance floor?
Correct.
Right? Or to the live scene, and then what else?
And then finally, and this is an important kind of part of talking to an agent, is the team and the people who that artist surrounds themselves with. 9 times out of 10, I would say, when an agent signs an act, you are engaging with someone else other than the artist directly, or in tandem with the artist and their team. Right? So who is the manager? Who is the lawyer? Who is the business manager? How far along in this artist's career are they? Right? There are times when I certainly have spoken directly to artists and signed them, but those are fewer and far between than the amount of times that a manager will solicit agents, or the artist has made and produced music to a degree where it's very obvious that an agent needs to be in place. Does that make sense? And typically that means that there is a team present. Very few artists are just cranking out records by themselves. They're going viral by themselves. They don't have anyone around them. And then an agent calls you, or you reach out to an agency and hit them up on Instagram. They listen to your music. Those stories are just, they don't make up the lion's share of signing stories. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we always look for a team. If it's a manager who we know or who I know, or a manager that you have a friendship or relationship with, no doubt you're going to take the conversation with more importance, more urgency when they say, hey, I've got this act that I'm working with, you need to sign it. So I think having in a lot of ways, having a manager can be a beneficial thing for a growing artist if it's at the right time. At the end of the day, to kind of bring those three together, we're looking, as agents, we're looking for artists who are ready to perform live in, multitudes of cities all over the globe.
Yeah. How do you know they're ready?
Well, you talk to them. You converse with them, and typically you can find out how ready they are. You can obviously look at data and metrics, and you can see, obviously now you can go on your Spotify and you can look at how many fans you have listening from each city. Like, that's part of it. But I think there's a gut sense that makes great agents great, where sometimes I'll just have a conversation with an artist and have a 30-minute Zoom, and the music's good, the artist is really cool. Even if there's not a team at that point, like those two, like, this is a great human. They're enigmatic. They're eccentric. They're like popping off the screen. There's like almost a 3D person in the room with you on a Zoom or in a meeting. You have a lunch with somebody. You can kind of tell, like, this is someone who is going to attract fans and is going to attract a fan base and a business because of the type of person they are. And some of the biggest artists I've represented, some of the best artists I've represented, some of the most successful artists I've represented or represent now, all have this je ne sais quoi of, like, my God, this guy's a rock star, this girl's a rock star. Yeah. Like, and that's easy sign you're going to do everything you can to work with someone like that, because you can see that, if you're attracted to working with them and being in a room with them and hearing from them, outside of just the music they make, then others are going to be as well.
Yep. Yeah, I've definitely seen that as well. There's some people that come along every now and then when they walk in the room and they just have that X factor. They have that there's this sixth sense kind of a thing where it's like, oh, this person's going to be fucking big. They're just already, it's like, even though they haven't created it in their reality, they're living it, in their internal world. Like Sullivan King was one of them, who I worked with early on. It was like, he was a rock star already before we even booked his first show. he was already a fucking rock star. Just the external reality was just waiting to catch up to him, you know?
Yeah, sometimes it can be that obvious. If you meet Sullivan King, the guy is just, he's breeding this enigmatic, like awesome, flavor of life. So, I think it's that combination of things. I personally wouldn't want to work with an artist who's a shitty person or who comes off abrasive, like that. Those little things all kind of go into a melting pot, and then you're looking at it and saying, wow, I think this artist is going to go.
And then what does the process look like from, does the whole team decide on who you're going to bring on? Because obviously you're representing your roster as an agent, and that's kind of like those are your people, but you're also part of a bigger ecosystem of the agency in general, which, you have a boss and whoever's kind of in charge. Like, how does that look? Do you get to just kind of sign whoever you want? I mean, you're obviously at maybe a different stage in your career, but is this more of a group decision? Are there other people that are involved with having to sign off on who comes on board?
Well, you kind of said it. It depends on where you're at in your career. If you're a younger agent and you're coming up in the world and, there's a track record, there's time spent. In my case, I'm fortunate to be in a situation where if you really have a gut feeling, UTA is very supportive of that. Like if you really connect with someone and say, I believe in this, I think it would be very, very rare to be like denied to sign an act. But of course, we always have conversations internally. We have A&R meetings. We have internal systems that we've built to always be talking about the viability of artists that we're signing. Typically I'll be aware of any electronic act, certainly, and on a wider scale, any act that we bring on, we're always talking about it. We're sharing it internally. That's the hive mind of an agency. That's why agencies exist. Otherwise, it would all be us on our own. It'd be the Hogan agency, and that would be it. And I would just do exactly what I wanted all the time, and I make a ton of mistakes and miss a ton of great artists. So it's the community and the team that helps us to ascertain whether or not different artists make sense, unless it's just painfully obvious. And and a lot of times in our industry, every agency is going after one artist at that one moment because they're blowing up. They got a viral record, they got something on the radio, they've got this big moment, they have their pop moment, and then it's obvious. And in that case, we're going to try to put the best team together to work with that artist. So again, we're always discussing internally. We try to avoid siloing, or it's called hip pocketing is another term that's used in the industry, where you just go off on your own, hit this artist up, sign it. We're trying to communicate as much as possible. Communication internally is what makes agencies great. Otherwise, you just have a bunch of rock star agents in separate rooms and silos just doing whatever they want. That's not cohesive. That's not gonna, you're gonna end up having problems sooner or later with that.
Yeah, and that's good to know. I think that's good for artists to know, because they're oftentimes looking at like, okay, well, this is who's going to represent me? Who's like the one person, the agent that's going to represent me? Maybe not realizing that there's actually a whole agency representing you, that agent is working with their teammates, that there are these, collaborative discussions happening as well. I'm sure there's so much more, kind of behind the scenes going on than somebody might think. And it brings up a question for me. I've seen a lot of artists consider this when they are at the point of, being ready to get an agent. Oftentimes there's the question of, should I go with the new agent who is young and hungry? They haven't proven themselves yet, so maybe they're, they have something to prove, all right? They're going to have to put in those extra hours, and they're really going to go above and beyond to help me get those shows, versus going with the bigger agent who is representing huge clients, and all they have to do is, send one email and they can book any show that they want, but maybe they're going to be the smaller artists on the totem pole, right? So there's this conversation I see oftentimes of the pros and cons of that. What are your thoughts on that? Because it's funny. I mean, I met you when you were the young dude. We worked with you represented James Egbert, who was like the first artist I managed early on. Like we were fucking young kids in our 20s, just coming up. So
yeah,
you've got to be on both ends of that now and be the big agent now. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, like you said, I have seen kind of all sides of that, from starting out and being the young, hungry agent who had to kind of prove himself in the meeting and sign some of the bigger artists I represent now, some of the biggest artists I represent now, to, later in your career where you might be considered a desirable agent or a bigger agent, or have some media and some word of mouth about the stuff that you've done. I think it really, again, kind of like I was saying, where you have that connection. When you're a young artist, you should talk to this prospective agent, and you should ask those questions. A lot of times we'll get asked, well, where would I fit on your roster, right? Am I going to be house artist number 43 on, you know what I mean? Am I going to be your biggest client? How many, you have to kind of size up what the bandwidth is going to be like for that agent, and how passionate they are, how much they're going to be dedicated. A multitude of factors come into that, and there's no right answer. I would never tell artists you should sign with the biggest agent you can, and I would never tell artists you should sign with a young, hungry agent. You have to sign with the right agent. You're not making a decision that you're tied to for the rest of your life. Agencies rarely, I would say, like sign contracts similar to how management typically would, where it's like, oh, if you sign with me today, you're with me for 10 years. That's not necessarily how the industry works at this time. So, I think you take your time. I think that you go with what feels right. Again, there should be that gut connection. There should be this like, wow, this is my girl, this is my guy. This person is who I want to represent me. That's the way it should go, and you'll know when you know. I mean, it's kind of like, I hate to make it cheesy. I was going to say it's the cheesiest comparison in the world, but it kind of is. I mean, you're essentially going on your first like date to meet this potential agent, and it is kind of similar. When you know. Yeah. You're building hopefully a very long-term relationship, and you're doing it one day at a time and one step at a time and one conversation at a time. But a lot of artists that I've signed, even I would give a recent example. I've heard from an artist that I recently signed, like I knew like after our Zoom pretty much. Like we talked and you had all the answers to my questions. Ask questions. That's a huge thing. Sometimes we'll get on with a prospective client and they don't really have any questions for us. Think about that. Think about that before your first call with an agent, and have 10 questions for them. Agents love answering questions. That's what we do. But there's no right answer. I think for young artists, I would say this: being knowledgeable about what agents exist and what agencies exist, that is a really great skill for a young artist, to be knowledgeable about the world that you're stepping into, the economy that you're stepping into, the industry that you're stepping into. The more you know, the better. And that might seem obvious too, but frankly, I mean, a lot of the times that's not the case, right?
Yeah.
You're learning how to ride a bike, and we know everything about bicycles, right? We're the specialists. So you have to look at that power dynamic, right? And be aware of it, and empower yourself as an artist with knowledge. All this stuff is online. You can go on every agency's roster and see who they represent. Like, none of this stuff is necessarily secret. There's not a book that tells you everything that I'm aware of about every agency necessarily. Maybe there should be one day, but it would be a very biased book. Yeah. So you have to look around and see. Some artists like certain personalities of certain agents. You have to find an agent who matches your ethos as it pertains to business, and a certain business ethos and acumen that's going to guide really how your brand is perceived from the buyers of the industry. Some people want an absolute pit bull, go get it done no matter what agent. Some people want a little bit of a different blend of personalities for the person who's representing their brand. And it's all going to be part of how people think about your artist name.
You bring up such a good point. I've never really thought about that before, but that this person is representing you, literally representing you, not just the business, but the brand in general. Their personality and their, as you said, just their ethos is going to be connected and create this brand perception of even who you are. So that's a really, really important decision to make. And definitely. I mean, I've always often had I feel like I've met a lot of agents that there's oftentimes a kind of a particular kind of energy and attitude, if you, like Ari Gold from Entourage, just that like kind of cutthroat. We're going to go out there. Like they're the salespeople, right? We're out here to make the fucking money and make the deals happen. And there's sometimes a kind of an energy that comes with that, which is necessary. But yeah, that's good to really think about of like, all right, do you want this person having, your name attached to their business as well?
Yeah, and you brought up such a good point, like how media portrays agents is almost it is almost comedic, and oftentimes comedic, whether it's Tom Cruise or whether it's actually, he's done a couple, but like in Tropic Thunder, right? Like that character as an agent, Matthew McConaughey is like that's another perfect example. And then, Tom's the big studio executive. We're kind of portrayed, Entourage, another perfect example, as these kind of blowhard, I would say douchey, I hope I can say that, like these kind of, the gross guy in the corner of the room, like making a lot of noise. That's not how agents are. And there's such a multitude of diversity and different human beings that you can work with. And oftentimes it's kind of like when you see somebody walking with their dog in the park and you're like, you know what, that looks like your dog. Like you two look alike. You guys belong together, right? In a perfect world, I think like sometimes the agent matches the artist in a lot of ways, and you see them walking together at the festival, and you're like, that's that entourage. It's like that group of people.
Yeah.
And Ari Gold obviously is like probably the most famous example of the agent who gets himself into trouble all the time with his big mouth. And so we're all ideally every agent is trying to be a good human being and trying to be a likable human being, trying to make this as easy as possible. We all work very long hours. It is a very stressful job. I've seen it get too stressful before. It is just grueling. We work weekends. We're traveling at the times when we want to be with our families the most. A lot of times for agents, you got to understand, it's like we have to oftentimes go with the artist and go do the show and be at the show and keep those hours and do all that travel. But then for us on Monday morning, we're back in the office, and that's peak work time, right? The week after Ultra is really difficult. It's the weeks after Coachella and the week in between two Coachellas when you have artists playing Coachella. It is very difficult to balance all of that. If I'm getting 500 emails a day and I go on vacation for a week, do the math, right? What am I coming back to? So
I remember at one point when I was pretty young in my career, I was still working at Capitol, and I knew an agent over at William Morris, and he was just this badass, stud representing some really cool artists. And I really looked up to him and I respected him. I'm like, man, this guy's just created a fucking cool career for himself. And I remember asking him, I'm like, dude, what's your secret to success? How have you created this career for yourself? And he just blankly looked at me as like, dude, I work 14 hours a day, like every day, just grinding, and I think that is something to, especially for artists. I think it's good for artists to even understand that as well. And sometimes artists, especially when you start to become successful, you maybe take things a little bit for granted, right? Like, oh, I deserve to have these shows. Why am I not getting booked at more shows? Or why is my fee not higher? And it's like, hey, you got to remember, man, you got people on your team that are fucking putting their blood, sweat, and tears into this, for you. And it really is about teamwork is what's coming up for me right now. Is it's like, all right, it's not just you, it's everybody working together. And we need to also like understand what other people are doing and the work that other people are putting in too.
Yeah, there's something to be said about trusting the process in your music career. Trying not to be impulsive, trying to be filled with gratitude, really. I think the more gratitude you have as an artist, the happier you'll be in this journey. And I've seen it at all different levels. And more gratitude will always provide you more happiness when you're going through the stress and rigmarole of a live touring musician. It is some heavy stuff, and it has to be taken, kind of step by step. But yeah, I think you're spot on in general, and it's just about finding that groove and working relationship that's going to be best for all parties, and that's going to make everybody feel good, and that is just cohesive, right? It's a blend, and you're always feeling like your team's working for you. The other point I wanted to make, I think, for young artists on the show, a lot of times artists will preempt needing an agent because they feel like it's something they have to have in their Rolodex. They feel like it's a necessary part, and it is. I think that artists need agents, but you need them at the right time. If you're not getting any inquiries to book you on the email that you have listed on your social media and on your music streaming platforms, you probably don't need an agent yet. If no one's trying to book you, you'll know when the time comes, because people will be reaching out saying, "We'd like to have you on," not necessarily on EDC Las Vegas or Coachella or Lollapalooza. But people are going to reach out to book you if you're doing something right. And oftentimes I have to tell aspiring artists, it's too early right now. You're getting inquiries for $500 a show, $1,000 for a show. if you have a manager and an agent, and they're confirming $1,000 shows for you, and you're flying to those shows, and those are inclusive shows, and you don't have a hotel provided on that show, and then inflation hit, your manager might be making $200, $150, whatever the manager's taking. You're paying taxes on that. You have to buy a flight. You have to pay for a hotel room. You're already in the red. And then what frequency are those shows going to come? I mean, oftentimes with early artists, we will do, super low fees and make it happen to get them in front of an audience, to get them on the road, to get them out on flyers, to expose them. But you can die from exposure. So you need an agent when ultimately the agent's going to come in place, and immediately they're going to be able to earn their commission and to further your career. You don't necessarily need an agent when you're not touring yet and there's no demand to tour yet. So there has to be that congruent kind of point where the demand to book you as an artist meets the supply and meets the agent in the middle to where we can actually help you.
And that comes back to, I want to come back to the point that you made before, which I think some artists don't always understand, is having that team in place first. It's like the agent, as you're saying, comes a little bit later down the road. It's not the first person that you're adding to the team. You're probably going to want to have a manager first, right? And having a team that can help you build the buzz and build the demand, right? And get those songs out there that are going to actually really start creating some noise in the industry, creating some interest, and getting supported by other artists, and let's talk about that real quick. Like what are the things that you see in place, like when there is buzz, like when that artist really is ready, what's actually happening? Like, yeah, there's offers coming in, but what's happening on the artist side and on the team side that is really creating that buzz that's getting them ready for an agent?
So there's a couple of things that I've seen that really stand out. I think first off, almost certainly, I talk to promoters all day on the phone. That's probably the lion's share of what I'm doing is interacting with promoters. So typically promoters are pretty knowledgeable in the dance world. Promoters who are booking entire festivals, right, from different genres, for example. A lot of the folks at, whether it's C3 or Insomniac or Golden Voice, they know, what they're listening to. They know what the audience is listening to. They're very keen. And so we're certainly looking, the most obvious things. We're looking for artists who are recognizable and who promoters are picking up on. A lot of times I'll look on social media at a prospective artist who's hit me up and see who else is following them, right? Okay, you've got 3,000 followers on Instagram. It's very early. But if 40 of those followers are also connected with me on Instagram and are other artists or are industry heads or executives or people who touch dance music or people who have been around for a long time, and I see that they're following you, that's an instant green flag.
That says something.
I think you're looking for a brand. Even in the early days, you're looking for an identity. You're looking for someone who has their shit together, frankly, who has a proper bio, who has a proper release schedule, who has, we're looking for artists who have 20 songs, 30 songs on deck, and you listen to 15 of them, and they're all awesome. Like, that all will give you the sign, okay, there's something happening here. I work on our digital assets team too, and we like to be at the forefront of every new emerging technology, of every new data point where we can, again, ascertain, pop the hood of this really nice looking car and see what the engine looks like and see how it actually operates and see, look, you can go buy bots on Instagram and all of a sudden have 4,000 comments on your posts. And we can also see that. I can go through your Instagram and see where you went from having 17 comments to 400, and you got the same people commenting 9 times. So yes.
Warning, never fucking do that, artists. Do not buy bots. We know what you're doing.
Very, very difficult, if not impossible, to obfuscate or fake a connection with an audience. And so we're looking for genuine artistry. We're looking for professional artistry, and we're looking at all those data points and trying to analyze that moment when things are popping off. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. There are also artists that I've worked with, that we've worked with, that we sign because we like the music, we like the team, we like the look, whatever it is, and for 6 months or a year, it might not pop, it might not connect, and then it does. And then they're huge all of a sudden, or they're on the festival circuit, or they write a song. There is no Bible for this, and it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong if it hasn't connected yet, especially if your product is great. But there is a moment where it will become obvious. When we are, I would say one example I would share is, I don't know if young artists really know this, but when you're on a festival, and when you start to get booked on festivals, your position on the flyer is very determined by, what kind of touring you're doing. Are you selling your own tickets? If it's really early, what do your numbers look like? I've gotten in tons of arguments with promoters as a proxy to another agent, where we are arguing which of our artists is bigger so that they can be one slot to the left on the flyer and thus closer to the top left of the flyer, which thusly makes them a bigger artist. Like, that's a big part of what we do. And so, of course, when you're talking about festivals, when you're talking about breaking, you're going to want that arsenal, that ammunition, so that your agent can have a conversation with a festival and say, look at this. I mean, there's 20 million plays on this record, or there's 900 comments on this Instagram post. This artist is blowing up. It's an important part of the industry, and certainly a lot of my time is spent, not well spent, but it's necessarily spent arguing position on different flyers, arguing performance slot on a show as a support act at Red Rock. Should they be third on or fourth on? We're always looking, and unfortunately we're kind of bespoke to or tied to some of those metrics as the only way to ascertain which artist is bigger, right? The golden ticket, or the golden rule, is who's worth more tickets, who has a bigger audience, right? You sell out an arena in 9 seconds, you're going to get great billing on a festival. If you've never played the market, you're going to have a tougher time, regardless of who your agent is, convincing the promoter that you're massive, even if you have a bunch of streams on a record, right? So it's all goes into kind of what we do, which is ascertaining, representing, and negotiating the perceived size of an artist.
Do you guys also help with strategy? Are you working with the manager to talk about, like, beyond just like the shows, but are you playing a role in that bigger strategy? Because I remember even just like back in the day when we were working together, with James early on, it was like there was other stuff. We were making music videos and we were doing things. You guys were kind of even doing a little bit of a management role, and that was like in the Circle days. That was pre UTA. But do you guys still help with that side of it, or are you really just sticking to the show side of things these days?
I'm not speaking for all agents, because there are a lot of agents who I don't think overlap with the creative. But for me, I've some of my best success stories and some of the greatest artist partnerships that I have had more of I've put my creative hat on, and I've taken some risks saying we should do this, or we should do it this way, or we should make the flyer look this way. I mean, we did this show for Svdden Death and launched his Dead Room project at Academy last year. And I don't know if you saw it, but we hired a bunch of fake celebrities, celebrity lookalikes in LA. We hired a limo, we had a red carpet, and all these. We had a Tom Cruise, we had a Lady Gaga, we had we had an Austin Powers and a Dr. Evil. That was definitely something that, like, we were all in Denver and just talking about like what we could do for Dead Room, and
yes.
As a hive mind, that idea came, but I got to be a part of that conversation. That was really cool, and got to be a part of the behind the scenes planning process and making it come to life. And when it works, it's a great feeling, because you feel like you really put your iron in the fire versus more of a transactional agent who says, hey, here is this offer, let me know if you want to confirm or pass. I certainly, as an agent, for better or worse, will typically put my input in on what we should do or what the project should do. I think we should do this, versus just being a relay agent, saying, hey, I got this offer, here it is, let me know. I'll typically put a little bit on the line there and say, I think we should do this. And if it works out, it's great. And if the festival stinks, or it's a stinker show, or it doesn't work, then that's the inherent risk of an agent kind of stepping out onto that line, right?
Yeah.
So.
I love that, though, because I think that's something good for artists to think about. At least myself, if I was getting an agent, I would want someone like that. I would want someone that's going to bring some other outside of the box ideas to the table, that's really going to be a member of the team, and not just say, hey, you can only talk about shows, but no, you can also talk about bigger picture strategy here. Like, bring some ideas to the table. I've always heard the same thing said about lawyers. It's like, if you're going to get a lawyer, you don't want a lawyer that's just going to do contracts for you, but get a lawyer that's also going to bring you business, because a lawyer is connected to so many other people and producers and artists and labels and everything that they should also be bringing stuff to the table for you. So just something to think about for artists.
Again, it really depends on the artist and what you want out of your life. But I'd like to think that as an artist, you want to get on a call with your team and hear a bunch of ideas. And also, I think artists should want a team of people who are willing to also risk. And it shouldn't all be on the artist. The artist shouldn't have to come up with, well, this is what my tour is going to look like, and this is what the production is going to look like, and this is like, you have to have a team to help you create this art. You're not painting a picture. That's not what we're doing here. And as an agent, I'm not selling a picture that you painted. It's a much deeper, we're building a story that is a nonfiction story. We're writing your autobiography. Of course I want to write a little bit. I want to be in that autobiography at the end of the day. So that's really where I think agents that's where I've had the most fun doing this as a profession, and that certainly has been where I've had the most success, or the biggest memories that I have are ideas that I had that we had as a team, or that the UTA team brought, opportunities that we brought that came to fruition and then were great, and then people talk about. Then you really, that's a trust building thing too. If you come up with a great idea as an agent for a show and it sells out right away, I mean, you're going to have that trust, and then you can take more risk, and you can build more verticals, and you can spread your wings a little bit wider, rather than just kind of bringing the offers and doing the minimum kind of paper pushing part of this, pencil pushing rather.
Speaking of teamwork and trust, you've had some clients that you've worked with for a very long time, Svdden Death being one of them. You've been with him since pretty much the beginning. What would you say has contributed to that long-term relationship? Like you said before, it's like a marriage, right? And so what has contributed to this marriage working out for so long so far?
Yeah, I think, again, like going back to what we said super early on, that is an amazing team, and it's like a family, even more so than a marriage. It's not Svdden Death and I, or his management, which is Colin Duggar, who's amazing, and Adam and Stephen Pahel and Moshe Leasy, all at TSG. There is a massive team on the Svdden Death project, and everybody's in the room for bigger decisions and creative elements and the general direction of the project. I think one of the reasons that we're all kind of a happy family and it's going so well for him is because everyone has a voice, and it's not a dictatorship or an authoritarian regime. Everybody kind of gives input. We discuss a lot. We have a lot of conversations. We have an internal, we're always talking on internal threads about different ideas and different parts and pieces of the project. And there are so many facets to Svdden Death. There's Svdden Death, there's Void, there's Dead Room. We've done different touring kind of shows that hit different festivals. Into the Inferno was like a fire show that we kind of came up with as a team. And,
Wow.
And, he had a fire sword and was breathing fire for, we stopped doing it because it was too dangerous, literally too dangerous. And he was like risking burning his hair off every night. And,
Yeah, dude. But that's what it's about, man. It's about pushing the fucking boundaries as an artist. You got to be you got to be pushing the boundaries. We don't need to see the same shit anymore. So I fucking love that, man. Let's breathe some fire.
Yeah, we've built a festival called Summoning of the Eclipse with Svdden Death that's been, totally a team effort, where they kind of, originally Svdden Death came to me, at a certain point in time, was like, we want to do a Void show somewhere super weird, like find a cave, find a church, find a prison, find something that doesn't exist as a four-wall normal venue. At the time, no DJs had played at the Caverns in Pelham, Tennessee. It was a place where jam bands played and Christian music came often, and there was maybe like a Pretty Lights history. I don't even know if he had played there yet, but a lot of stuff like Soundtribe Sector 9 or Disco Biscuits in that Jamtronica scene. We came into the Caverns and sold it out for Void, and then built it into a festival. They had an amphitheater outside. Now it's become a sold out 5,500 person weekend event with 2 stages and 40 artists. And so again, that was all a team effort of coming up with how can we do things differently and do something that pushes the needle, or that pushes the envelope rather, that hasn't been done yet. That's always a fun team to work on. Those are always fun artists. Whenever an artist gets on a call with me and says, I want to do something that nobody else has ever done, Great. Let's go DJ in space. Let's go do something. I saw that there's an artist who's about to do that soon. I mean, it's, we're all looking to create nonfiction. That's like our purpose on this planet. We're not like making something up. We're actually going and doing something that people are experiencing and going to talk about for years. We want to create experiences to where, fans that are now 25 when they're 55 can remember that night, that weekend, that experience.
We're talking about some really cool outside of the box ideas. A lot of these things also cost a lot of money to do. And so I'm curious about, what does that look like? And I'm assuming it's probably different in every situation, but is the artist paying for the production? If the artist wants to do all this cool extra shit, is that usually coming from the artist budget, or is it the promoter that's putting in, or is it kind of a collaboration of both? Like, what does that look like usually?
I mean, it's all really, first of all, it's wildly expensive. And the pandemic didn't help. And certainly inflation right now doesn't help, and our macroeconomic, kind of conditions don't help. It's gotten more expensive since I started doing this. Almost every year, it just continues to become more brutal and difficult and a challenge to make sense of the finances. The simple answer is, every deal is a new deal. Every great agent is flexible. There are always ways to say to the promoter, you're giving us this much money. How are we going to cut that up or budget those different elements? Is this show going to require a large production budget? Maybe we can budget that in the offer. There are different ways to do that. I don't send very many all-in offers. Typically when you get a festival offer, right, you have to build a budget for every single show. That's part of the kind of challenge, but also part of the beauty of touring in general. If we can charge a certain ticket price, or if there's a certain venue that has lower costs where we can divert more money into a budget for production, then we can go do a really cool show. And that will have a secondary value to the primary value. The primary value is go do the show, take the money, here's the budget, and this is what the walkaway is. But a super effective, impactful show is going to lead to a very large festival offer. Hopefully a festival where the artist doesn't have to bring production, because there's already production there. If you're going to play Lollapaloozas at Perry's, you don't have to necessarily bring a show. I've had artists who have brought big shows and have spent the whole fee, but you're looking for we're building a long-term financial roadmap to success. Artists are going to bring in money as their careers grow from other revenues, from merchandise, from streaming, from publishing deals. But in the live, world, there are many shows where an artist is going to say, confirm this, knowing full well that there will be no take home, right? There are grueling 6-week bus tours that artists in the electronic world go on that we've been booking for a long time. I remember booking Excision with Steve Gordon years and years ago, and working on routings where, at the time, artists were not going into empty concert rooms and bringing on a bus essentially the entire show besides racks and stacks. That's like the speakers, the sound. You're bringing everything else.
Bringing all the production.
Yeah, and those tours are very difficult to make money on. But now, if you look at Excision, would anyone question the steps that he took and the amount of money that he put into his career? The Slander guys are another example of artists who I worked with that put a lot of money and time and effort and would lose money all the time on shows. Svdden Death is a perfect example of someone who will go into a show and maybe not make any money or spend money, or have a festival that loses money for 2 years and then makes money the third year. That's part of the artist story, is you're investing in your overall product and brand. Yeah. And so a lot of times, to be an effective artist, you need to look at the entire year. It's like any other financial business that anyone runs, or any financial journey. You have to look at the bigger picture and the macroeconomics, not necessarily the microeconomics of, I'm going to lose $5,000 to do this show, I can't lose money. Well, you're not really losing money, because when you make the festival fee on the next play, you're actually making a lot of money. And year over year, you're going to make more money every year. So yes, that is a hard part for young artists. It's a hard part for headliner artists. It's hard at all facets and during all steps of your journey as a musician. There's going to be these difficult choices. Do we bring our show to Coachella and lose money to play Coachella? For a lot of artists, the answer is yes. You get in there and you play your epic show, and you're defining what the next brand or what the current brand is. And then you're building this, behemoth of a touring act, and some of the most effective artists of all time in the touring realm have always had mind-blowing next level shows. That's just how it is. You want your fan who's going to eventually be spending $70, $80, $90 to see you, or $250 on your festival. You want them to walk away at the end of the day, the consumer, feeling like they got what they paid for.
Yeah.
And so that's the process. You have to talk to your agent, your manager, and talk to yourself in your mind as an artist and say, is this show that I'm putting on, is that going to be worth X amount of dollars to the fan? When they leave, are they going to be leave? Or is my music and my show so good that I can play on a DJ table in a dark room? And that's what we're doing on this tour. And then people are still going to leave and say, oh my God, that was the best night of my life. There's no Bible for this. There's no tried and true, this is the right way, this is the wrong way. But oftentimes we see, especially in the electronic world, that artists that are willing to invest in their product, their show, their performance, their tour are rewarded in other ways. You're going to sell more merch on the road, which means you're going to make more money. You're going to stream more records if you have an awesome show. When people see video of some of the bigger names in electronic that have defined big production over the years, Tale of Us is a great example and an obvious example right now in this time. When people see that video, they want to go to a Tale of Us concert and pay more money for it. And it rises, it's all guns and butter and supply and demand. But people are going to want to come see your concert if they see video of 8,000 lasers and big plumes of fire and confetti spraying into the air. It all builds the demand for your act.
Tale of Us is a great example because they played out here in Austin at the Concourse Project, and typical, weekend tickets for most artists there are usually like $30. They're not too expensive. Maybe they go up a little bit more the day of, but Tale of Us started at $100. So they're charging 3 times as much as your normal artist, right? Because they put in how many tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars into their production and created all of those viral moments. And so I love this conversation so much, and I really hope that everyone that's listening is really having this land, because what I'm hearing is the importance of playing the long game and not just thinking about that short-term game, right? Really understanding how this business works and really seeing yourself as running a business. This is something I talk about a lot of times on the podcast, is like seeing yourself not just as an artist that's making art, but someone that's also running a business too. If you want to be successful and get your music out to as many people as you can and live your dream of going on tour, then you have to really understand this business side and really think like a business owner. And this is definitely like such a really good and important just mindset, I think, to have, is to really be looking at that long-term game, right? Like, how are we investing in this, right? How are we, taking the money that we're making from these shows, reinvesting it back to create these amazing experiences, and then knowing that this is going to pay off down the road, rather than just, taking whatever fee we can and holding on to it and, kind of living in scarcity in that sense. And it takes a lot of vision. It takes a lot, I think, having a really strong and clear vision of where you're going, and also having a lot of like faith and trust, and maybe having a little bit of courage to say, all right, we're going to send it. We're going to invest and trust that this thing's going to pay off down the road.
Absolutely. And again, I mean, you look at the success stories there. It's like no one has to question on Excision's team or in Excision's world whether or not the choices he made were right. And that's why, we will typically push, Black Tiger Sex Machine, another perfect example. They're putting so much into their show and into the visuals and into the brand. Regardless of the specific finances, they know that investment is worth it, and they're blowing up. Their fees are doubling. It's crazy what's happening with that project right now, headlining festivals. And so again, the hard work that you put in is really going to determine the output. And so part of that is spending money and investing in yourself like you were running any other business. If you owned a bakery, if you go buy the best mixer and the best products for the bakery, it's going to cost a lot of money. You might run in the red for 6 months. But as soon as you hit that green, you're going to know that it was worth it. So artists are going to have to understand very early in their careers that this is not about money. The same thing as for me or anyone working in music, I didn't get into this to make money. And certainly when I started doing this and moved out to LA and dropped out of college and put my whole life into 3 boxes. This is not some glamorous lifestyle, especially in the early days. I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years. Certainly now there's, I can turn back and say, all right, cool, I have this, that, and the other that I've gained, and I have these assets now. But if you want to make it in music, you have to be ready to suffer financially to some degree. It's not, you're not doing this to get rich quick. It's not like we're not playing scratchies here. Like it is a very long game, and there are artists who are 10, 15, 20 years into touring who will still go and look at a festival and say, we're going to lose 200 grand to do this. Yeah. Or look at a tour, okay, we're going to go tour in South America or Asia. The fees aren't great there. We're going to go tour in Europe. The fees are low, but then we're going to have an audience in Europe and we can tour Europe once a year. Right.
And I think the big distinction too is it's like, it's not that we're going to lose 200 grand, but we're going to invest 200 grand. Right. We're going to lose this or sacrifice this for the moment, but it is an investment. It's going somewhere. We know that 200 grand is going to come back. That 200 grand is going to become 500 grand, right? Or whatever it may be, right? So I think that's something important for all artists, because there can be a little bit of resistance to spending that money of like, oh, I don't want to spend a lot of money on my branding. I don't want to spend a lot of money on, my cover art or whatever. And seeing it as not spending money, but investing money. I'm investing this money knowing that this is going to result in me having a bigger project and more success down the road, even if I don't see it right away.
Correct. I mean, it's like anything else. You get what you get out of it, what you put into it, almost certainly.
Yeah, man. Well, dude, you have certainly put in a lot over the last 15 years. You have helped build the careers of so many incredible artists, and for yourself as well, man, knowing you from, 10 or 12 years ago and seeing where you're at now and what you've done, it's really, really impressive, and it's a true honor to be able to spend this time with you today. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all of your wisdom, letting us pull back the curtain and see a little bit of what actually goes on behind the scenes in this agency world. So I really, really appreciate you sharing with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I certainly hope that your audience will get, even if it's just one little thing, like the thing that I've noticed going to meetings, going to conferences, you have to listen and see if there's one little thing that jumps out at you, and then just take that and bring it with you on your journey. But it was an absolute pleasure to be speaking with you on, anytime, and certainly, reach out for any of the artists that I work with, and we'll try to get them on the show too, and anything we can do to support. And yeah, thanks for the invite.